The foolish sword sage was instantly vigilant. He felt that it was a trap. He had asked about Hanju after his defeat. This child was extremely cautious and never left the heavenly Tao. He asked cautiously, "Why do you want to see me?" "Let's catch up and discuss the divine authority generals." "Not in the dream? Are you afraid of me? You've stepped into the great Tao Supreme Realm twice, after all. Are you still afraid of me?" "How do you know that?" The foolish sword sage became even more vigilant. Hanju said, "I heard from Red Fate. She has already decided to move to the heavenly Tao and join forces with me." The foolish sword sage's brows relaxed. "You really want to deal with the divine authority generals?" "That's right." Hanju was stunned. On second thought, this was a good thing. He secretly asked, "Can I insta-kill the foolish sword sage? 400 billion years of lifespan will be deducted. Do you want to continue?" "Continue." "Yes." "That was good." Hanju said, "Of course." The foolish sword sage smiled. The divine authority generals are indeed impressive. They aren't ordinary great Tao sages. They can even monitor the independent domain of a great Tao Supreme. I've also been thinking about how to resist the divine authority generals during this period of time. Hanju asked curiously, "A great Tao Supreme can't defeat 10,000 divine authority generals?" Foolish sword sage rolled his eyes. "How? It's said that they have the cultivation of great Tao sages, but they're still formed by the supreme rule. It's just that the level of power is equivalent to a great Tao sage. It's essentially very difficult to destroy them." "Then, how many divine authority generals can you fight?" "The 100. Hanju showed a frown. That was equivalent to 100 foolish sword sages at the great Tao Supreme Realm. Hanju asked, "There are also great Tao Supreme existences among the chaotic fiend celestials. Won't the chaotic fiend celestials have a chance of winning if they all join forces?" Hanju was deep in thought. Foolish sword sage asked, "Have you also attained the great Tao Supreme?" Hanju hesitated for a moment but still chose to nod. He should trust this guy with such a high favorability. "How impressive," the foolish sword sage said with a strange expression. He cursed silently. No wonder. This fellow wanted to bully him? The foolish sword sage was even more shocked. Hanju's strength was already terrifying. How could he be an enemy if his cultivation realm caught up? "By the way, who killed you the previous time when you were a great Tao Supreme?" Hanju asked curiously. The foolish sword sage replied, "I'm not sure, either. Speaking of which, I was also confused at that time. I had just attained supremacy and thought that I was the only great Tao Supreme. I don't know who the other party is, but he's definitely terrifying. He might even be the strongest existence in the chaos." Hanju didn't use the derivation function. In any case, he was the foolish sword sage's enemy. That ancient deity did not attack now that the foolish sword sage had attained the great Tao Supreme again. He had probably let go of karma. Hanju opened his eyes after the dream ended. 100 years later. The lecture ended. Hanju wanted to continue cultivating, but after thinking about it, he still headed to the 33rd heaven. He directly entered the Universal Hall. Only Heavenly Venerate Shendu and Loudon were in the hall. Loudon opened his eyes and sized him up, looking surprised. Hanju's treasures were not simple. His temperament was even more impressive. Loudon inexplicably thought of Lousy. Hanju nodded slightly at Loudon to show his courtesy. Then, he said to Heavenly Venerate Shendu, "Gather all the sages for a meeting. The sages of the hidden sect will also be called over." Although he was no longer afraid of the divine authority generals, he still had to make his stance clear to prevent some sages from acting recklessly because they were too afraid. It was normal for sages to be afraid of death. At least, Hanju could understand. Heavenly Venerate Xiandu was stunned. Then, he immediately sent a voice transmission to gather the sages. Before long, South Extreme Heavenly Venerate, Sect Master Tianju, Emperor Shao, Heavenly Venerate Wufa, Chou Shilai, Feng Liang, Jin Shen, Han Xian, Su Du Dao, Su Qi, Li Taigu, Primordial Chaos Buddha, Zhang Guxing, Long Hao, Ji Xianshen, Divine Might Buddha, Yang Che, Tai Su Tian, Tian Zhan, Han Yu, Qin Ling, Xiao Jizuan, World Salvation Buddha, Dao Sovereign, Zhao Xianyuan, and Jiang Yi all arrived. Lao Dan looked at the number of sages and became dazed. Even the human school in the deity realm of the ruins of En did not have so many sages. At first, he did not feel anything, but after all the sages arrived, the shock was still very strong. The sages became excited when they saw Hanju. The Divine Might Heavenly Sage was the Heavenly Tao's greatest trump card. Lao Dan stood up and prepared to leave. Lao Dan was moved and sat back down. He also wanted to hear what Hanju had to say. Hanju was the first to speak. The matter of the Divine Authority Generals has been in everyone's mind recently. Although I'm in seclusion, I've also heard that the Divine Authority Generals not only want to destroy the chaotic fiend celestials, but also the heavenly Tao created by Pangu is also in their target range. This means that the heavenly Tao will fight the Divine Authority Generals. I hereby express that this battle must be fought. He spoke very slowly and softly, but the words were heavy. He had to fight. The sages were excited. Although the sages had temporarily reached a consensus, they were still afraid of the Divine Authority Generals. Hanju continued, the Heavenly Tao has no backing ever since it restarted. It's all thanks to us sages, the Heavenly Devil Calamity, the Flame Race Calamity, the Calamity Race's Calamity, the Divine Spirit Calamity, and so on. When has the Heavenly Tao ever relied on the chaos? So what if they're the Divine Authority Generals? In the past, when have we not been in desperate situations? Besides, the Divine Authority Generals' opponents are not only the Heavenly Tao but also the chaotic fiend celestials. We are not alone in this battle. I hope that all the sages can calm down and stabilize the Heavenly Tao. Who in the chaos will dare to provoke the Heavenly Tao in the future if we win? How can the chaos tolerate us if the Heavenly Tao is gone? How can we be slaves in other worlds? Hanju stared at the sages and spoke firmly. The sages were all excited. Thinking back to the past, it was indeed not easy, but they survived. It was not that Hanju's words were beautiful, but mainly because of his determination, as if he could definitely survive this calamity. Who did not know that the Divine Might Heavenly Sage had unparalleled potential and had never lost? The other sages also began to express their stance. Pan Xian laughed. It's been a long time since we last fought. I hope the Divine Authority Generals can fight us. What are we afraid of with the Divine Might Heavenly Sage on our side? Although we are new sages, we are not afraid of battle. This battle can show the Heavenly Tao's power to the chaos. TSK, the exquisite world invited me, but I rejected them without any hesitation. When will the Divine Authority Generals arrive? You make me want to fight now. The sages spoke one after another, and the atmosphere was agitated. Hanju glanced at Heavenly Venerate Shindu. He understood and took over the authority. He began to summarize the recent development of the Heavenly Tao and deployed the space around it. Lao Dan, Dao Sovereign, Zhao Xianyuan, and Jiang Yi listened quietly. Their feelings were very different. He did not expect the Heavenly Tao sages to be so harmonious. At first glance, It was even more harmonious than the discussion of fellow disciples. There were no conflicts of interest. Loud inside, this divine might heavenly sage has some methods. He doesn't only know how to enter seclusion. He felt that Hanju might have threatened the sages in private. Otherwise, how could they be so harmonious? Tao Sovereign and the other two were even more proud. The heavenly Tao already belonged to the hidden sect. No wonder Hanju didn't deliberately develop the hidden sect. He had already occupied a high-rise building, so the development of the grassroots was naturally casual. After Heavenly Venerate Xiandu finished instructing, Hanju said, "I've roped in 2 great Tao sages. One of them will bring their world here. At that time, they will be distributed near the Heavenly Tao. They will develop with the Heavenly Tao and help each other in the future." The sages were shocked. 2 great Tao sages? They already knew of Great Sage Void Soul's existence. With 2 more, wouldn't there be 4 great Tao sages? The sages enslaved by the primordial heavenly prison thought of the divine robed Taoist. There were 5 of them. Li Taigu said excitedly, "Senior Han is really powerful. In that case, we have more confidence in resisting the divine authority generals." The other sages flattered Hanju sincerely. Xiao Jizuan and the World Salvation Buddha didn't know much about the Great Tao Sage realm, but they knew that it was 2 major realms higher than them. Definitely unfathomable. They looked at Hanju with reverence. Zhang Gusheng looked at the calm Hanju with mixed emotions. He recalled the Sword Dao River. At that time, he had never thought that this would happen. It felt like a dream. He understood one thing. Meeting Hanju and showing goodwill was the greatest opportunity in his life. If not for Hanju, how could he have been elected as a sage? Hanju stood up and said, "In short, everyone, manage the heavenly Tao well. I will definitely take action when the divine authority generals arrive. There's no need to panic. As for your connection with other worlds, grasp it well and choose a good path. I can let bygones be bygones, but I don't want to see it a second time." With that, Hanju disappeared. The sages looked at each other and heaved a sigh of relief. Su Dudao looked at Yang Che and said in a strange tone, "Be careful." Yang Che snorted. "You too? Idiot! I'm already a loyal servant of the Divine Might Heavenly Sage. How can he hurt me?" Han Xian looked at Jin Shun and said, "We have to hurry up on the second chaotic heavenly road. Choose one side from the alliance of 100 worlds as the end." Jin Shun nodded. The other sages also chatted. Laodan looked at Heavenly Venerate Xiandu and said, "The Divine Might Heavenly Sage is indeed impressive. It seems that you didn't choose blindly." Heavenly Venerate Xiandu replied, "Following fellow Taoist Han is at least responsible and not inactive." Laodan frowned. The 2 of them spoke without restraint. The other sages heard it, but they pretended not to. They knew very well that Heavenly Venerate Xiandu was expressing his loyalty to the Divine Might Heavenly Sage. Hanju sat on the 36th grade Reincarnation World Destruction Black Lotus after returning to the 100-peak Immortal River. He did not cultivate immediately. Instead, he looked at the Supreme Treasure Fusion Cauldron in the Myriad Worlds projection. He had too many Dharma treasures in the system. It was time to fuse them. The first thing he thought of was the Primordial Judgment Sword. The heaven-opening axe was still Pango's weapon no matter how impressive it was. The Primordial Judgment Sword was Hanju's birth Dharma treasure and was paired with the Primordial Fiend Celestial. However, its realm had always been lower than his cultivation realm, so it had always been stored in his warehouse. The Supreme Treasure Fusion Cauldron could fuse all Dharma treasures. This might be able to help the Primordial Judgment Sword. Hanju waved his hand and took out all his Dharma treasures. Qilin Sword, Demon Binding Rope, Burning Fiend Bell, heart-protecting immortal chain, calm meditation mat, heavenly spirit bracelet, purple gold soft armor, God Slayer sword, heaven and earth primordial sword, 9 elements 10,000 life sword, and so on. He suddenly had a bold thought. Should he also fuse the heaven opening axe into the primordial judgment sword? He asked in his mind, will I lose control of the primordial judgment sword if I fuse the heaven opening axe into it? No! Then, can the primordial judgment sword surpass an ultimate Tao treasure? Possible. Only a possibility? Hanju hesitated for a moment and started the fusion. The Supreme Treasure Fusion Cauldron was not a physical object but a function. Hanju let the system do it. Dozens of Dharma treasures fused into the primordial judgment sword, including the heaven opening axe. The main item was the primordial judgment sword. The product would still look like this sword after the fusion. Do you want to start the fusion? Yes. Do you need to make sure? Are you afraid that I'll act recklessly when I'm drunk? Hanju found it funny. Fusion begins. Please wait patiently. It involved an ultimate Tao treasure and would probably take some time. Hanju was not in a hurry and began to meditate and cultivate. In the Panga Hall, Pan Xian opened his eyes in the middle of his meditation. He sensed carefully and could not figure it out. He suddenly thought of a possibility. Could it be that the heaven opening axe is calling me? Pan Xian frowned. After all, he had used the heaven opening axe for a period of time. However, he couldn't find it. Damn it! I'll kill all of you sooner or later. Pan Xian thought hatefully. He could only try his best not to think about it. In the dark forbidden zone, a majestic pagoda was advancing. Countless cultivators gathered around it, as well as chaotic beasts. It was unstoppable. Zhou Fan had his arms crossed as he looked ahead. It was dark, but he could already see the heavenly Tao. We're finally going back, Zhou Fan muttered to himself and smiled. Mo Fuzhou stood beside him and asked curiously, we're almost there? Zhou Fan nodded. Mo Fuzhou looked expectant. He had been thinking about the heavenly Tao after reviving. He had been very confused when he learned that he had been revived in the chaos. He felt out of place. Everything was like a dream. Only now that he was returning to the heavenly Tao did he feel that he was really alive. I wonder if the Jade Pure Sacred Sect is still around, Mo Fuzhou muttered to himself. Zhou Fan rolled his eyes. Zhou Fan said, it should still be there. The hidden sect disciples mentioned that the reroll world, where the Jade Pure Sacred Sect is located, is the second mortal world of the heavenly Tao. The Jade Pure Sacred Sect is also the #1 sect in the reroll world. Mo Fuzhou smiled. So powerful? It seems that our Jade Pure Sacred Sect is really lucky. Zhou Fan curled his lips. How was the Jade Pure Sacred Sect powerful? It was clearly because of Hanju. He didn't dare to look down on him. After all, he was also benefiting from him. The two of them chatted as they waited for the Great Tao Tower to reach the Heavenly Tao. At the edge of the Heavenly Tao, Feng Liang had already begun to wait and was in charge of receiving the Great Tao Tower. After all, the Great Tao Tower LED many cultivators. They had to make arrangements, or it would easily cause panic. The news that Zhou Fan was a disciple of the Hidden Sect also spread, revealing the Hidden Sect's foundation to the Heavenly Tao cultivators. The Hidden Sect had always been a major force in the immortal world, but it kept a low profile and rarely fought for great Providence. Usually, cultivators would find it difficult to think of them. Because of the Great Tao Tower, all living beings began to dig up information about the Hidden Sect. The more they understood, the more shocked they became. Year after year passed. 40,000 years later. On this day, a notification appeared in front of Hanju. Fusion successful. Primordial Judgment Sword has been upgraded to an ultimate Tao treasure. Hanju was a little disappointed. However, it was impossible upon thinking about it carefully. Other than the heaven-opening axe, the grade of the other Dharma treasures was not enough. Hanju hurriedly used his supreme power to control it. The Primordial Judgment Sword was his birth Dharma treasure, to begin with. He did not need to refine it again. Hanju began to sense the Primordial Judgment Sword's power and fused it with his will. Unlike the heaven-opening axe, Hanju felt extremely close to the Primordial Judgment Sword. He could easily mobilize all the power it contained. After a long time, Hanju began the simulation trial to familiarize himself with the Primordial Judgment Sword. 100,000 foolish sword sages. Hanju fused the 1,949 fiend celestial Dharma idols into his body and used the primordial divine rage to slash out. He killed them all. Hanju was pleasantly surprised. The Primordial Judgment Sword was even more ferocious than the previous heaven-opening axe. Apart from the killing intent of the heaven-opening axe, there was also the power of primordial chaos. When fused together, it truly displayed the power of an ultimate Tao treasure. Hanju's strength suddenly increased after acquiring the new Primordial Judgment Sword. Indeed, Dharma treasures were also very important. Pangu could fight against 3,000 fiend celestials with the heaven-opening axe. He could only fight dozens of fiend celestials without it. Of course, this was also related to Pangu's cultivation. 200,000 foolish sword sages. This time, Hanju felt a suffocating pressure. After fighting for a long time, he finally killed all 200,000 foolish sword sages. He frowned. He was still far from being invincible. After all, he was still a realm higher. Facing the foolish sword sage, he actually killed as many as came. Hanju sighed and opened his eyes. He suddenly felt an aura. The foolish sword sage's aura. At this moment, the foolish sword sage was staying in the Great Tao Tower. When did this fellow arrive? Hanju was vigilant. He had been careless. He immediately used the simulation trial to test the foolish sword sage and copied his data again. Then, he began the simulation trial again. 1-on-1, insta-kill. 100 foolish sword sages were insta-killed. 1,000 foolish sword sages took 10 breaths of time. Hanju continued fighting. After several rounds, he found a way to insta-kill 1,000 foolish sword sages. The battle became difficult after he increased the number to 10,000 foolish sword sages. Hanju discovered that the foolish sword sage was indeed much stronger than before, but there was not much difference. Perhaps the previous foolish sword sage had already attained the Great Tao Supreme Realm. He could also show the level of a half-step Great Tao Supreme with his perfected Great Tao Primordial Chaos Realm cultivation. The foolish sword sage had said that he could fight 100 divine authority generals. In other words, Hanju could kill 1,000,000 divine authority generals? In that case, the divine authority generals were not worth mentioning. It was also possible that the foolish sword sage was bragging. Hanju thought carefully. The reason he was so much stronger than a Great Tao Supreme of the same realm was all thanks to the Grand Unity aspect and the stellar primordial body. The Grand Unity aspect allowed him to have nearly 2,000 helpers, and they could also fuse into his body. It was equivalent to increasing his strength by 2,000 times in battle. Of course, other cultivators would not be able to withstand 2,000 idols of the Grand Unity aspect. Because of the non-coexistence of the Great Tao, it might be difficult for them to cultivate more than one Great Tao power. 7 Tao Sage was something. He had actually grasped 7 Great Tao. Hanju thought of the 7 Tao Sage and suddenly felt that he might be someone with great providence. If not for him, with his methods and potential, he might have grown into lousy or an even stronger existence. Unfortunately, he was courting death and insisted on finding trouble with Hanju. After thinking, Hanju put away the primordial judgment sword and stood up to see the foolish sword sage. He wouldn't die even if the foolish sword sage ambushed him. As for whether the chaotic consciousness would attack, Hanju was not worried. He could spy on the entire chaos. He could discover it immediately if the 7 supreme rules and the 3,000 great Tao fluctuated. In addition, he had left a trace of will in the Taoist temple. He could be instantly revived in the Taoist temple even if he died. It was very safe. It was perfect. At the top of the Great Tao Tower, Zhou Fan, who was already a freedom sage, did not sense the foolish sword sage above his head. The two sides were less than 50 feet apart. They were so close, but Zhou Fan couldn't discover him. It was enough to show the difference between the Great Tao Supreme Realm and the Freedom Sage Realm. Hanju suddenly appeared behind Zhou Fan and snorted. "Don't be a peeping Tom. Haven't you heard?" Zhou Fan opened his eyes and hurriedly turned around to bow to him. "Master, what peeping Tom?" Zhou Fan asked carefully. This was his territory. What was there to peep? Foolish sword sage smiled. "I'm just curious about the Great Tao Tower. Back then, I also had a relationship with the 7 Tao sage." Zhou Fan suddenly looked up, trembling in fear. There was actually someone above him. Zhou Fan was instantly filled with fear. When did the other party arrive? He actually did not sense anything. The foolish sword sage landed and looked at Hanju. "I can't see through you. It seems that I'm still not your match." His tone was intriguing, but Hanju heard a hint of unwillingness. "You can't defeat me. Even 10,000 of you are not my match." "You're alone?" Hanju asked. He didn't mind the foolish sword sage's offense towards Zhou Fan. After all, he didn't hurt him. The foolish sword sage said, "I once created a world. Later, I felt that it was cumbersome and abandoned it. The world perished in less than 10 billion years." He spoke casually as if that world had nothing to do with him. Zhou Fan frowned. However, the mention of 10 billion years caused him not to dare to be hostile. To be able to live for 10 billion years, who knew how strong he was? Hanju said, "I'll arrange a place for you to stay. Don't disturb the heavenly Tao life forms casually." Foolish sword sage snorted. "Don't worry. There's nothing else in the heavenly Tao that makes me curious other than the Great Tao Tower." Zhou Fan became nervous. Hanju said, "Don't think about the Great Tao Tower. This is my disciple's supreme treasure." "I understand. I don't have to snatch treasures from juniors. Let's go. Lead the way." The two of them disappeared from the hall. Zhou Fan was relieved and curious about who that person was. On the other side, foolish sword sage. Sect Master Tianju took the initiative and instantly became respectful. Clearly, he had heard of this name. Hanju looked at the foolish sword sage and said, "You can stay here and cultivate in the future." The foolish sword sage nodded. He turned around and walked to a corner to meditate. Hanju left after instructing Sect Master Tianju. The foolish sword sage's arrival quickly spread to the sages, making them believe Hanju's words even more. He could really rope in a Great Tao sage. 20,000 years later, Red Fate arrived. She opened her right hand and released a vast world that landed beside the heavenly Tao. It was almost half the size of the immortal world. Red Fate took the initiative to negotiate with Heavenly Venerate Shendu and explained that she was invited by Hanju. The sages were excited. Another Great Tao sage had arrived. Not only that, but she also brought a world. This world was so vast that it naturally attracted the attention of the heavenly Tao cultivators. The news could not be hidden. For a time, the situation in the immortal world changed. All sorts of rumors circulated. In the blink of an eye, Hanju entered seclusion for another 50,000 years. Hanju's cultivation speed decreased again after reaching the Great Tao Supreme Realm. Not only was his cultivation speed slow, but he also suddenly lost his sense of direction. He didn't know how to cultivate. He opened his eyes and began to stabilize his Tao heart. One could definitely cultivate in the Great Tao Supreme Realm. It was definitely not stagnant. What should he care about? Hanju's gaze landed on the primordial world. Previously, it was to refine stars. What should he do now? Hanju began to try various methods. The stars had already reached their limits and could no longer be refined with supreme power. The nebulous primordial chi had already transformed into a primordial space and was very stable. It could no longer be improved. After countless attempts, Hanju finally found the method. Expansion of the primordial world. This method needed to open up the space in the soul and let it constantly expand. The primordial space would expand as well, causing an endless stream of nebulous primordial chi to be born and connect to the primordial space. Hanju's cultivation level would also increase as the nebulous primordial chi increased. He didn't know if the expansion of the primordial world had a limit, but he could cultivate for now. Hanju opened his eyes and sent a dream to Red Fate. They chatted for a while and finally met. Red Fate had already settled down. With the help of the sages, the heavenly Tao cultivators did not find trouble with the Red Fate world. Hanju checked the emails after the dream ended. After so many years, he didn't know how his friends were doing. Hanju could directly observe them, but that was too troublesome. The emails were more interesting. Your grand disciple Chpter was attacked by a mysterious mighty figure. Your son Han Tuo has returned to the chaos. Your good friend Yi Tian has returned to the chaos. Your good friend Jiang Juesher was attacked. X19. Your good friend Di Jiang has received guidance from your good friend Pangu. His cultivation has increased greatly. Your good friend Empress Hutu has received guidance from your good friend Pangu. Her cultivation has increased greatly. Your good friend Huang Zuntian has fused with the Great Tao Providence Divine Authority. His cultivation has increased greatly. Your good friend Divine Lord Peacock was attacked by the Great Tao Providence Divine Authority and was severely injured. Your good friend Divine Robe Taoist was cursed by a mysterious curse. Han Tuo and Yi Tian had returned? It seemed that the Great Tao Divine Spirits had been careless recently. The meeting between the 12 ancestral magi and Pangu was a sign that the battle was about to begin. Hanju didn't plan to interfere in the battle between the chaotic fiend celestial and the divine authority generals. After all, both sides were his enemies. Once his identity was exposed, the chaotic fiend celestials would definitely join forces to deal with him. It was better to let them fight to the death before he harvested the divine authority generals. As for the consequences of killing the divine authority generals, Hanju didn't have much of a burden. The hidden sect disciples had already returned one after another. He could just take all the disciples back to the Tao field if he really angered the chaotic deities. However, he felt that the chaotic deities would not attack. He was an existence higher than the chaos, and Hanju was defending himself. How could the chaotic deities attack? In addition, Hanju still had Pangu as his backing. The current resurrected Pangu was only a clone. Pangu's main body was still around even if he was destroyed. Could Pangu stand by and watch if the chaotic deities dared to attack the heavenly Tao? Hanju had a feeling that Pangu was not much weaker than the chaotic fiend celestials. There was also the mysterious and unknown Tao ancestor. These two were the true backing of the heavenly Tao. Hanju sent a dream to Divine Lord Peacock after reading the emails. This fellow had not been careful recently and was injured again. Could the great Tao Providence divine authority that attacked him be a divine authority general? Hanju met Divine Lord Peacock in the image of the Dark Forbidden Lord. Divine Lord Peacock opened his eyes and saw Hanju. He immediately looked awkward. The Dark Forbidden Lord would visit him in his dreams every time he was injured. Although it was out of concern, it also made him lose face. Divine Lord Peacock hurriedly said, "This time, I wasn't defeated by someone at the same realm, much less suppressed by a great Tao sage. It was a divine authority general. 10,000 divine authority generals are too strong. One of them casually glared at me and I almost lost my soul." Speaking of this, Divine Lord Peacock still shivered when he thought about it. He had never encountered such a terrifying thing. Hanju asked, "When will you attain the Great Tao?" Divine Lord Peacock replied, "Soon, soon. I've already been checked by the Divine Authority Generals. I can cultivate in peace now. Legend has it that the Divine Authority is about to destroy the chaotic fiend celestials, the heavenly Tao, and the mysterious primordial fiend celestial. Is that true?" Hanju said, "I don't know. It doesn't matter as long as you're safe." "What do you think of the Divine Authority Generals?" Divine Lord Peacock asked carefully. There were various opinions regarding the Dark Forbidden Lord's identity. Some time ago, because of a sentence before the death of the first life Black Sovereign, the chaotic living beings thought that the Dark Forbidden Lord was a great Tao divine spirit. Hanju said, "It's just a trigger of the chaotic rule. It has nothing to do with us. Don't ask and don't think too much." Divine Lord Peacock immediately had many guesses. Hanju instructed, "Hurry up and attain the Great Tao. I'll be forced to re-evaluate your potential if you're injured before attaining the Tao." Divine Lord Peacock agreed immediately, but he was panicking inside. He also felt embarrassed. His performance in the past 2 million years was far inferior to the past. It made him look like he was bragging. Hanju didn't say anything else and directly removed the dream. Realizing that he had returned to reality, Hanju began to observe the heavenly Tao. 2 more sage positions appeared in the heavenly Tao after the calamity ended. Hanju didn't plan to interfere and let nature take its course. Hanju looked at the chaos next. He captured the 10,000 divine authority generals advancing in the chaos. They were still far from the heavenly Tao, but they were already very close to the grand primordium domain. Dozens of chaotic fiend celestials gathered in the grand primordium domain, including Pangu. After reviving, Pangu's aura was not inferior to before. The other living beings in the grand primordium domain had already been dispersed, leaving only the fiend celestials waiting for the final battle. The divine authority generals seemed to sense the chaotic fiend celestials and deliberately approached the grand primordium domain. Hanju looked forward to this battle. Hanju retracted his gaze and continued cultivating after watching for a while. Deep in the chaos, in the dark forbidden zone, a beam of light sped away. It was Jiang Jueshi. Jiang Jueshi suddenly stopped and looked forward with a sharp gaze. The dark space fluctuated and a figure slowly walked out. "Ancestor Shitian." Jiang Jueshi asked, "Why did the ancestor only appear after chasing me here?" Ancestor Shitian said expressionlessly, "You know very well that I'll leave after saying a few words. Just pretend that I didn't catch up to you." Jiang Jueshi frowned and fell into confusion. He had never been able to figure out Ancestor Shitian. It seemed that he had been captured by him, but all these years, Ancestor Shitian had provided him with a safe cultivation environment. He felt that Ancestor Shitian had entered life with ulterior motives. In his opinion, the chaos was not lively. On the contrary, it was lonely. It was rare to see a living being in hundreds of years. Under such circumstances, his potential was easily spied on. Jiangjuesher fell into self-doubt. Could it be that the chaos was really more terrifying than he had imagined? Were there many eyes staring at him? The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. He had indeed been careless. After all, reincarnation for hundreds of thousands of years was too long. Ancestor Shitian continued, the future heavenly Tao still needs you to save it. I'll teach you the great Tao of karma before I leave. He waved his sleeve, and a ball of light quickly entered Jiangjuesher's forehead, preventing him from reacting. Jiangjuesher was stunned. Ancestor Shitian was already gone when he opened his eyes again. He did not stay in place and quickly left. In the darkness, a majestic golden Buddha dragged a world with one hand. It was the sacred true martial Buddha. The heavenly Tao was already ahead. Sacred true martial Buddha's gaze landed on the red fate world. He was slightly moved. Chu Shuren's voice floated into his ears. Don't worry. That's a great Tao sage invited by my Grandmaster. The Buddhist world is to position itself on the other side of the immortal world, forming a defensive formation on both sides. Sacred true martial Buddha immediately stopped asking when Chu Shuren mentioned his Grandmaster. He circled around the heavenly Tao and arrived on the other side of the immortal world. Sages appeared one after another and looked curiously at the sacred true martial Buddha. Feng Liang had already revealed that the Buddhist world was also moving here. They were already looking forward to it. The sages introduced themselves. Sacred true martial Buddha did not put on airs. He knew that he had to stay near the heavenly Tao for a long time. They might also fuse together in the future. He did not resist. Instead, he was very satisfied. It was indeed difficult for him to rely on the Buddhist world alone. The immortal world was different. He would die even if a great Tao divine spirit attacked. The sacred true martial Buddha chatted politely with the sages. 10,000 years later, after discussion by the sages, they began to arrange for heavenly Tao cultivators to go to the Buddhist world and the red fate world. They would first spread the providence of the heavenly Tao. Under the accumulation of time, they would fuse with the heavenly Tao sooner or later. Red Fate and Sacred True Martial Buddha had no objections. The heavenly Tao was not afraid of the divine authority generals. The foolish sword sage had fought Pango twice and survived. His reputation had long shaken the chaos. It was as if the divine authority generals would no longer target the heavenly Tao. This situation made the sages very happy. At the same time, they were glad that they did not leave the heavenly Tao. Inside the Taoist temple, Hanju opened his eyes and frowned. He had been in seclusion for another 50,000 years and his cultivation level had increased greatly. The primordial world had already nearly doubled in size. It was not bad. As the primordial world increased, the distance between the stars also increased. They began to develop meteors, which was quite magical. Hanju habitually checked his emails. The wait for the divine authority generals was a little boring. Discover new Tories at Bin Co. However, the later the divine authority came, the more confident he was. Soon, Hanju was attracted by an email. Your good friend Evil Heavenly Emperor was attacked by a mysterious mighty figure and was severely injured. He continued reading and saw another related email. Or was. Your good friend Evil Heavenly Emperor was attacked by the Great Tao Providence Divine Authority. His body was destroyed, leaving only a remnant soul. So tragic? Hanju's heart tightened, and he immediately sent a dream to the evil Heavenly Emperor. The dream was the forest back then. The evil Heavenly Emperor opened his eyes and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that it was Hanju. Your Majesty, have you encountered a divine authority general recently? Hanju asked. The evil heavenly emperor smiled bitterly. That's right, but I'm fine. I've long escaped the providence of the heavenly Tao and am not a heavenly Tao life form. Hanju was relieved after hearing that. The evil heavenly emperor said, You're preparing to deal with the divine authority generals? I've heard of the heavenly Tao situation. It hasn't collapsed yet and is even constantly absorbing mighty figures. Are you going to fight? Hanju felt that there was nothing to hide and nodded. It's our duty to protect the heavenly Tao. The evil heavenly emperor clicked his tongue in wonder. I'm beginning to suspect that you're not a chaotic fiend celestial. The divine authority generals are about to suffer. The evil heavenly emperor was shocked and looked at Hanju in disbelief. He knew him too well. This kid would not guard the heavenly Tao to his death. It was obvious that he was confident. Hanju felt a chill down his spine. Fortunately, the evil heavenly emperor knew his limits and didn't continue to guess Hanju's identity. What was higher than the chaotic fiend celestial's potential? By the way, I met an acquaintance among the divine authority generals. The Tao ancestor. He's also one of the divine authority generals. The evil heavenly emperor changed the topic and said with a dark expression,